Hi, and welcome to Biopilates Deep Dive. Today, I invite you to explore with me an exercise that looks simple, but when observed with rigor, becomes a true lesson in anatomy and biomechanics, the adductor stretch. We will frame it within the frontal plane and the sagittal axis and take a closer look at two muscles that are often forgotten but are decisive for the quality of movement, the adductor brevis and the pectineus. When we speak of hip abduction and adduction, we are referring to a movement in the frontal plane, organized around a sagittal axis. Abduction moves the leg away from the midline. Adduction brings it back toward the center. This seems basic, but in practice, everything depends on precision. For the movement to remain purely frontal, the pelvis must stay neutral and immobile. The slightest tilt or roll diverts the effort from the adductors, overloads the lumbar spine or the rotators, and completely changes the nature of the work. This is why we always emphasize pelvic neutrality and trunk stability, supported by the transverse abdominis and the pelvic floor. The protocol is straightforward. You lie on your back, the headrest adjusted to keep the neck long, the pelvis remains neutral, and the sacrum is well anchored on the carriage. The legs are parallel, extended on a low diagonal, the feet placed in the straps, the ankles in plantar flexion, and the toes gently pointed. On the inhale, you bring the legs toward the trunk without exceeding 90 degrees of hip flexion. On the exhale, you open into abduction, the carriage immobile, only as far as comfort and pelvic stability allow. The adductors then work eccentrically, particularly the adductor brevis and the pectineus. On the next inhale, you bring the legs back together in adduction concentrically and without losing parallel alignment. Then, on the exhale, you extend again on a diagonal, re-imprinting if necessary. The cycle repeats 5 times, fluidly and in alignment. Let us now turn to the anatomy. The adductor brevis originates from the inferior ramus of the pubis and inserts onto the pectineal line and the proximal part of the linea aspera of the femur. It is a short muscle with oblique fibers that links the pubis to the femur like a small medial bridge. Its main role is hip adduction, but it also contributes to slight hip flexion and medial rotation. It acts as a discrete stabilizer of the femoral head, particularly useful during single-leg stance. The pectineus, on the other hand, attaches to the superior ramus of the pubis and inserts onto the pectineal line of the femur just below the lesser trochanter. Its function combines hip flexion and adduction, and it may also assist in medially rotating the hip. Its anteromedial position gives it a particular guiding role, especially when the legs return to adduction after opening. It is dense, compact, and often overlooked in quick descriptions, but it is the muscle that gives precision and quality to the return. On the physiological level, the adductor stretch relies on eccentric work during opening and concentric work during closing. During abduction, the fibers of the adductor brevis and the pectineus lengthen under tension. This controlled elongation engages the stretch reflex. The muscle spindles detect the change in length and send a reflex signal to contract the muscle to avoid tearing. But because the stretch is progressive and accompanied by exhalation, this reflex is modulated. The muscle gains tolerance and functional flexibility. During adduction, the concentric contraction realigns the segments and reinforces neuromuscular coordination. The importance of breathing cannot be overstated. A deep exhalation during opening increases intra-abdominal pressure, locks the pelvis, and limits excessive reflex reactions. Inhalation supports the concentric return, nourishes muscle action, and promotes fluid movement. It is thanks to this synchronization of breath and movement that the stretch becomes a global practice, integrating stability, mobility, and neuromuscular control. You must remain attentive to certain signs. If your knees roll outward, you are leaving the frontal plane. If your pelvis tilts or oscillates, the amplitude is too great or stability is lacking. If your legs fall into abduction instead of actively opening, adjust the spring resistance or remind yourself that you control the movement, not gravity. Finally, if you feel excessive tension in the groin, check your alignment and slightly reduce the angle of opening. The benefit of this exercise goes beyond simple flexibility. The adductor brevis, by its role as a medial stabilizer, learns to release progressively without stiffening. The pectineus, through its guiding function, refines the return and centers the femoral head. Together, they teach the hip to open and close symmetrically and with control, in a subtle dialogue between stability and mobility. This balance protects the lumbar spine, supports the pelvis, and enhances performance in all movements that involve lateral displacement, such as team sports, martial arts, dance, or simply brisk walking. In conclusion, the adductor stretch in the frontal plane and around the sagittal axis is not just a flexibility exercise. It is a complete practice that combines postural precision, deep muscular engagement, and respiratory regulation. It transforms two discrete muscles, the adductor brevis and the pectineus, into true allies of your pelvic stability and functional mobility. Thank you for sharing this moment with me in the Biopilates Deep Dive. I look forward to meeting you again soon for another episode as we continue to explore the subtleties of mindful movement and the infinite richness of the Pilates method.